And on this anniversary weekend of 9/11, we're going to talk a little bit about that and the state of the country today, Islam, terrorism, and all of that. And we're joined by Congressman Keith Ellison. He is the first Muslim member of Congress, took the oath of office with his hand on the Quran. He is in Minneapolis, and we're also going to talk with the co-chairman of the 9/11 Commission, Tom Kean. And Governor Kean, I want to start with you because you headed that commission that looked into 9/11 and tried to figure out why it happened and what we should do about it. And last week, you and your co-chairman, Lee Hamilton, issued another report that I must say was pretty much overshadowed by the Quran burning controversy. So I want to put the spotlight on that for a minute. Basically, you and Mr. Hamilton concluded that we have failed to anticipate the real danger we face now from homegrown terrorists. You went on to say in the report that terrorists have found our Achilles heel. Just how serious is this, and what do you actually mean by that?
Well, we think it's very serious, and we think it's a growing threat because the strategy has changed. It's much more difficult for Al-Qaeda to maybe have a great big attack like 9/11, so they're plotting smaller attacks, and they're using non-traditional people to try to do them. So best non-traditional people they can get, frankly, are American citizens. People with passports, people who can travel back and forth, people like the person who tried to blow up the bomb in Times Square. And they're recruiting these people every day over the internet. They're taking them to places not necessarily Afghanistan, but Somalia or Yemen for training. And they're trying to get them back into this country to do us harm. And we think that's a real threat that, you know, we've got to look at more seriously.
What should we be doing that we're not doing here?
Well, what we didn't do is a lot of recommendations. We wanted to alert the country. We have a lot of things we can do, such as making law enforcement at a local level more consistent with local law enforcement at the federal level, a lot of those things. But we're going to come out later with some recommendations. But we figured in this report, the first thing we had to do was really try to alert the country and alert the federal government to what we consider a new and a very dangerous threat.
Mr. Ellison, as the first Muslim to be elected to the Congress, what do you think about what Governor Kean is saying here? Because a lot of people say, well, we got to be very careful when we start trying to deal with American citizens because there are civil liberties at stake here, and we have to be careful not to go too far. You're a Muslim. What about this, putting more attention on American citizens?
Well, I think that Governor Kean is right. I think that he is correct that Al-Qaeda and the transnational terrorists are trying to be innovative in the ways they can hurt our country. I think the question is not whether his analysis is correct, because I think it is. The real question is, what do we do with the information that he has developed? I think the wrong direction is to sort of target discrete and insular minority groups like Muslims and sort of focus on that community in a strict law enforcement sense, because I think that could have a negative effect. I think the right thing to do is, one, reach out to mosques and Muslim groups all across the country to have a relationship of trust and open communication, because these good, loyal Americans will be among the first to say, you know what, we found somebody who's we believe is suspicious. Two, we need to make sure that we stand for civil liberties so that we can deprive people like Anwar al-Awlaki and Osama bin Laden of the claim that Muslims are poorly treated in America. The United States is not at war with Islam. The United States is a fair country. We know that there are occasions where people are not treated fairly, but those things are not lawful, so we've got to stand on our tradition of civil liberties. The third thing that I want to say to Muslim communities across the country, talk to your kids. Don't leave people out there, and understand that there are people trying to recruit your kids, and so you've got to be engaged with them, you've got to talk with them, and you've got to have open lines of communication with your children and with the law enforcement community. And there's more things that we can do, but I think that the information is right. The question is, what do we do with it?
Let me just ask you, every poll shows that the country seems to be becoming more anti-Islam. We saw these demonstrations in New York about where to put that mosque. 1 in 5 Americans thinks that Barack Obama is a Muslim. Where is this coming from, Mr. Ellison?
Well, I think that one factor is technology. Anybody, even an obscure, little-known pastor like Terry Jones can do something incredibly inflammatory, get it on YouTube, and all of a sudden he's an international celebrity. That is one element. But then there's another one. I think there is some anxiety and frustration in the country. There are some politicians who believe that it's to their political advantage to identify scapegoats and try to turn Americans on Americans for their own political advantage by pandering to our worst instincts and fears. And then I also think, you can't deny that, the criminals and the murderers who did this thing to our citizens on 9/11, they did associate themselves with my faith, Islam. That's unfortunate. Nothing they did is the Islam I know, or the overwhelming majority of the Muslims I know, but they did make that connection. So a lot of Americans they don't know anything about Islam. I recommend that Americans go out and get with your churches and your synagogues, reach out to a mosque, get to know people. And in my a few years ago when Ramadan was going on and Yom Kippur was going on, we got our congregations of Jews and Muslims together to break the fast.
All right.
I hope people around the country do that.
Let me just ask Governor Kean, do you think, because we mentioned the fellow down there that was wanting to burn these Korans, he called it off, the Secretary of Defense called him, General Petraeus spoke out about this. A lot of people say he was just a fringe character, and maybe they elevated him to another level when they did that. Do you think they did the right thing, Governor?
I think they felt they had to, but he is a fringe character, and he got blown up. But that's not what this country is about. In fact, Osama bin Laden wants this. I mean, that's his strategy, is to get this a war against Islam. It's not a war against Islam. The majority of Islam, vast majority of Islam, is all with us on this fight, helping us in this fight. And this is not a country about hate. Never has been. And we've got to recognize that, and we've got to, frankly, deal with the majority of Islam in good faith and show that we're willing to work with them as they are willing to work with us to get rid of this bad element that did this terrible event on 9/11 and would like to hurt us again if they possibly could.
Well, Governor, I just saw Congressman Ellison shaking his head. We have about 20 seconds in agreement with you, about 20 seconds left. Congressman, just a final thought?
Final thought is that I'm looking and talking with my colleagues about how we could perhaps pull together a bill to help study violent radicalization. We don't know enough about it, and we're operating on anecdotes. So I think that we need to move forward with Governor Kean's analysis and recommendations.
All
and
right.
I commend him for his work.
All right. Thank you so much, both of you. We'll be back with some final thought.